a leopard hidden in the bush, and an impala completely unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Hello everyone, and today we've got another incredible leopard sighting. Early one morning out on a game drive in Kruger National Park on the S119, I came across this leopard sitting right on the edge of the tall grass next to the road, quietly staring out into the open field. For quite a while, she just sat there calmly, tail flat on the ground, slowly looking around. Every now and then she glanced towards me, then turned off to the side before focusing straight back into the grass again. At first, I wasn't really sure what she was watching, but you can tell from her body language that something had caught her attention. She looked completely focused, almost like she was waiting for the perfect moment to make a move. After sitting there for quite some time, she finally decided to make a move. The impala was still roughly 50 meters away, completely unaware that the leopard had already been watching her for all this time. Slowly, she got up and took a few careful steps forward into the tall grass before stopping again to assess the situation. You could immediately see the change in her posture. Her body dropped slightly lower, her tail hung straight down behind her, and from that point on, every moment became far more deliberate. For the next several minutes, she moved forward in short bursts, a few slow steps, and then a pause. Every time she stopped, she would listen carefully, sometimes lifting her head slightly above the grass to check the impala's position before continuing forward again. One thing that always amazes me with leopards is just how patient they are during a stalk. There is absolutely no rushing, no wasted movement, and no panic. Everything is calculated. Even if it takes half an hour to close a small gap, they'll take their time if it improves their chances by even a small amount. And watching her now, you could really see that patience on display. She would move forward so slowly at times that you almost wouldn't notice her changing position at all. Then she'd freeze completely still for long periods, blending perfectly into the grass around her. The wind also seemed to be working slightly in her favor here. Predators rely heavily on staying downwind during the stalk because once the prey catches a predator's scent, the opportunity is usually over almost instantly. Impalas are extremely alert animals, and even though they might look relaxed, they're constantly using their hearing and sense of smell to detect danger. As she continued forward, the distance between herself and the impala slowly started closing. 50 meters became 40, became 30, became 20, and right here she's almost just about 5 meters away. But even at this range, she still showed no interest in rushing the situation. Here we can see the impala still seemed completely relaxed. Every now and then it would feed casually, occasionally looking around, but there was absolutely no sign that it knew the leopard was close by. This is one of the reasons leopard sightings like this can become so intense. A lot of people expect action straight away, but most hunts are actually very slow, careful, and incredibly tactical. The predator is constantly weighing risk versus reward because if the prey spots them too early, they waste valuable energy for nothing. And in the wild, conserving energy is extremely important. Leopards don't want long chases if they can avoid them. They prefer getting as close as possible before launching an attack. What also stood out to me was how focused she remained the entire time. She never seemed distracted by me, the birds calling nearby, or by anything else happening around her. Her attention stayed locked onto that impala from beginning to end. Minute after minute passed, and somehow the impala still had no idea. It would occasionally lift its head and scan around briefly, but each time it settled back down again, without spotting the danger, creeping closer through the grass. By now, tension was really building. You could feel that the leopard was getting closer and closer to a point where she might eventually decide to go for it. But at the same time, one wrong movement from either side could completely change everything in an instant. While this intense scene plays out, I'd like to remind you, if you're enjoying this raw, unfiltered look at African wildlife and these long-form safari stories, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It really helps support more trips into the bush and videos like this one. Thank you for being part of the journey. let's get back to it. At this stage, the leopard had managed to close the distance so much that it honestly no longer made sense to me why she wasn't already going in for the kill. But she was unbelievably close to the Impala now, separated by little more than a small bush. And from where I was sitting, it felt like the perfect opportunity was already there. But despite that, she simply refused to rush the moment. The Impala continued feeding calmly on the opposite side of the bush, occasionally lifting its head to look around before dropping back down again. Every single time it raised its head, it felt like this entire situation was about to explode into action. Yet somehow the leopard remained perfectly still. Normally, you would expect a predator to become more aggressive once they've managed to close the gap like this, but instead she almost became even more patient than before. And maybe that's exactly why leopards are such successful hunters. They don't just rely on speed or power, they rely on timing. At this distance, there's actually no room for mistakes anymore. One sudden movement, one sound, or one wrong step could instantly ruin everything she had worked for over the past hours. I honestly found myself wondering what exactly the leopard was waiting for. Maybe the Impala wasn't standing in the right position yet. Maybe the bush still wasn't providing enough cover for the first launch. Or maybe she was simply waiting for the ram to take one or two more steps closer before committing fully to the attack. Whatever the reason was, the leopard clearly seemed to believe patience was still the better option. And so the standoff continued. It almost felt impossible that the two animals could be this close together without the situation ending one way or another. Either the Impala would finally notice the leopard and bolt, or the leopard would eventually decide the moment was right to attack. But for now, neither happened. Instead, the silence and tension just kept on building. Over the next couple of minutes, the Impala slowly started moving even closer toward the leopard's position. At this point, the tension inside the vehicle became almost unbearable. The ram would occasionally feed for a few seconds, then take another step forward, completely unaware that it was drifting closer and closer towards the predator, hidden behind the bush. Meanwhile, the leopard remained absolutely frozen in place, barely even blinking as she watched the Impala approach. It honestly felt like we were watching the final moments before something dramatic happened. The distance between the two animals was almost nothing, and with every step the Impala took, you expected the leopard to suddenly explode into action. But once again, she refused to rush it. Even now, with the Impala practically walking into a lap, the leopard stayed unbelievably calm and controlled. Her eyes remained locked onto the ram the entire time, carefully following every movement while keeping the rest of her body completely still. And somehow, the Impala had still no idea. Every now and then the ram would lift its head above the bush to scan the surroundings, and each time it happened, my heart genuinely skipped a beat because it looked impossible that it still hadn't spotted the leopard sitting right there. At this stage, it almost felt less like a hunt and more like a silent game of nerves between the two animals. One fully aware of the danger and waiting for the perfect second to strike, and the other continuing to feed calmly, unknowingly moving deeper into trouble with every step forward. By now, the Impala was literally no more than a meter away from the leopard. It was almost impossible to believe what we were watching. The bush between them was now the only thing preventing the ram from seeing the predator sitting right beside it. At this stage, you could barely even see the Impala anymore. Most of its body had disappeared behind the bush, and every now and then only the tips of its horns would appear above the branches as it lifted its head to look around. The leopard, meanwhile, remained completely locked onto the ram. Every small movement from the Impala caused her to slowly shift her head position behind the bush, just to keep sight of it through the gaps in the branches. It was subtle, controlled movement, but you could clearly see how focused she had become now. And honestly, the tension at this point was unbelievable. The two animals were now so close together that it felt impossible for the situation to continue much longer without something happening. Then, after all the time sitting only a meter apart from each other, the situation finally started to change. The Impala slowly drifted slightly away from the leopard's position behind the bush, and for the first time in quite a while, the leopard suddenly needed to adjust herself as well. You could immediately see her focus sharpen even more as she carefully started repositioning to the side of the bush to keep the Impala within sight. Every movement now was unbelievably slow and controlled. She gently lifted one paw at a time, placing it down with incredible care before taking another small step forward. There was no rushing at all, and at this stage, the leopard knew that one careless movement would instantly end the hunt. The Impala, meanwhile, still seemed uncertain. Let's watch how the sighting plays out. And just like that, the hunt is over and she walks away to fight another day. Although the sighting is just a couple of minutes, this took over 3 hours to film. I hope you enjoyed it and subscribe for more.